Afternoon, everyone. I'll just let you all come into the webinar, give you a few seconds. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Opportunities for Geoscientists in the Energy Transition, Green and Natural Hydrogen and Helium, hosted by the Geological Society. We're really pleased that you could join us today. This session forms part of our wider webinar series, which brings together leaders from academia, industry, and government to explore how geoscientists can help accelerate a responsible and investable energy transition. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping points. Today's session will run for about an hour and will include time for a Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions for our speakers, please submit them through either the Q&A function or the chat function, and we'll be collecting them throughout and we'll aim to address as many as possible towards the end of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and made available through our YouTube channel at a later date. With that, I'll hand over to Baz, our Energy Transition Theme Lead, to tell you more about the series and to introduce our brilliant panel.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be able to host the fourth webinar in Opportunities for Geoscientists in the Energy Transition. As you can see, we have a regular session about once a month, and today's session on green and natural hydrogen and helium follows on from three other sessions we've had in February, January, and December, and we're looking forward to a number of other sessions in the future with carbon capture and storage planned for April the 28th. I'd like to introduce our panelists, and we'll have a short presentation after the introductions, and then we'll follow on with a conversation about opportunities. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Rick Snape. He's the Senior VP for Strategy and International Growth at Move. Rick serves as the SVP for International Growth for Move's clean energy business and is based in Madrid since September 2023. At Move, Rick champions the development of the commercial models and future international value chains that underpin the company's transformational strategy, growth strategy, Positive Motion. On behalf of Move, he is a member of the executive committee of the Global Impact Coalition, in which world-leading chemical companies co-invest in critical innovation. Rick's part of the World Economic Forum's Clean Fuels expert panel and regularly participates in high-level government and industry engagements on the development of future energy markets. Prior to his current role, he spent 18 years at Shell in a variety of key leadership positions, including VP of Integrated Gas Ventures, Program Director of Sectoral Decarbonisation, and General Manager of Strategic Integration. Rick holds a BSc and MSc in Geophysics from the University of Utrecht, an MBA from Duke University, and completed the World Business Council for Sustainable Development Executive Program at Yale. He also sits on the advisory board of Safe Water Gardens, aiming to bring safe sanitation to remote communities in Asia. Next, welcome, Rick. Next, we have Max Brouwers. Max is the Chief Business Development Officer at GTEC, where he drives growth in low carbon sectors spanning natural hydrogen, critical minerals, geothermal, and carbon storage. With over 25 years of international energy leadership, he's committed to accelerating the global energy transition by transforming innovation into commercial impact. Over more than 2 decades at Shell, Max held various senior leadership roles, including VP Exploration for Europe, Russia, and the Caspian. He oversaw exploration and energy transition activities across more than 17 countries, secured multi-billion-dollar commercial agreements, and spearheaded industry-wide digital innovation, such as the Open Subsurface Data Universe and a successful digital startup. Renowned for forging strategic partnerships with governments, national oil companies, boards, and cross-sector leaders. Max also serves as president of AAPG Europe and is a member of the UK Subsurface Task Force. He holds an MBA and an MSc in geology. Um, and Max is dialing in from The Hague, and I should have said Rick's dialing in from Madrid. Yassine Boubacar is actually dialing in from Reunion, which is in the Indian Ocean, so it's even further away. But Yassine is a geophysicist, senior geophysicist, and hydrogen explorer at H2AU, with a strong oil and gas background in seismic reservoir monitoring and 4D seismic project delivery. He's worked across the full 4D seismic workflow, supporting development projects and improving subsurface understanding. He also contributed to research on lighter and smarter seismic monitoring solutions. Building on this experience, Yassine has transitioned into natural hydrogen exploration, applying subsurface expertise to an emerging and fast-evolving sector. His work now spans the full project development chain from early technical screening through to licensing, stakeholder engagement, and execution planning. And last but not least, Tom's dialing in, Tom Elliott's dialing in from London. He's co-founder and chief operating officer for Hotspur Helium. And Hotspur Helium is a frontier exploration company establishing a new globally significant primary helium supply. They're a specialist in greenfield exploration. And Tom also specializes himself in greenfield exploration. He brings operational and corporate expertise to the acquisitions and development of large-scale helium acreage positions. Under his leadership, Hotspur has secured around 20,000 square kilometers of world-class exploration acreage and is advancing a technically driven exploration strategy, delivering long-term, reliable helium supply to markets in the Middle East and Europe. A chartered geologist, Tom has more than a decade of experience delivering exploration and drilling work, campaigns in complex operational environments, and his work has included geothermal exploration and development projects in East Africa and Indonesia, where he's managed large-scale field programs and multidisciplinary technical teams. Tom builds his high-performing teams and maintaining strong community and stakeholder relationships to ensure responsible project delivery. So thank you very much, all of you, for your time to appear on this interesting panel. I'd like to take us through an introductory slide pack so that we can all get on the same page. So today's webinar, Green and Natural Hydrogen and Helium, is part of a wider webinar series that we've just talked about earlier. But there are dependencies and linkages between the various webinars. So obviously, in the energy transition, we're moving from oil and gas into renewables and solar and wind. With that comes the opportunity for green hydrogen through electrolysis and hydrogen in general to be introduced, and natural hydrogen and helium will be discussed today. And there are links into critical minerals and energy storage. At the same time, there are also similarities between the hydrogen business and the carbon capture and storage business. And there are also similarities in the drilling components and the subsurface components of geothermal and heat. In terms of clean power, 2025 is actually a very interesting year because it's the first year that nuclear, wind, and solar on a global scale actually have ended up being a very similar percentage of global power generation. And in fact, wind and solar have rapidly accelerated globally, and they are the fastest growing electricity sources in history. I'm just going to move this out of the way because I think that's getting in the way of the slides. And within Europe, wind and solar actually took over in 2025 from fossil fuels in electricity generation. In terms of uptake of technology and adoption or market share, wind and solar are in the acceleration phase, um, and having reached 30%, are still in an upward trajectory, and that they are actually enabling the ability for green hydrogen, green steel, and green ammonia to actually emerge as part of the wider industrial supply chain. Um, there are actually many colors of hydrogen. I'm only going to talk about three here, but the vast majority of hydrogen that's produced globally is actually grey hydrogen coming from natural gas and steam reformation of natural gas. Blue hydrogen is where the CO2 is actually captured and stored. It's therefore defined as a low carbon hydrogen. But the cleanest of all is green hydrogen, where it's the input is water with renewable electricity using electrolysis to generate the green hydrogen. And there are many different forecasts, of course, of what the world will look like between now and 2050. But S&P Global Commodities in 2023 forecasted this ramp up, and you can see that we're at the beginning of the journey for green and blue hydrogen. In fact, there's a competitive landscape effectively between electrification for decarbonisation and the use of hydrogen, whether it's blue or green hydrogen. And you can think of the prioritization of hydrogen from the top right-hand corner downwards, where chemicals and refineries, international shipping, steel, long-haul aviation, seasonal storage, high temperature heating are potentially the highest priorities of and the best uses of renewable hydrogen. But there are the future hydrogen economy can potentially look like this in terms of the overall growth of a hydrogen gas network and the use of renewables and green hydrogen import and export. So there are a number of examples where this is emerging. In the UK itself, we'll talk a little bit about Merseyside, for instance, where now the HyNet Northwest project and industrial cluster is taking off. Carbon capture and hydrogen production are working in tandem. The carbon capture side is slightly ahead, but the HyNet Northwest cluster has already taken FID to build a CO2 pipeline, and they're also very actively looking at hydrogen pipeline in the area. And as an example of that, in the Liverpool area, you can see Cadent is looking very seriously at creating the first or the second hydrogen network in the UK. And the Stanlow refinery near to Chester is about to commit to 100% hydrogen fueled power plant for Europe's first of these. Another example is where so this is more blue hydrogen that's being considered in the HyNet Northwest cluster, but in the Humberside area, the Humber Hydrogen Project is very seriously considering the green hydrogen production. Number of companies are coming together, for example, National Gas, SSE, Equinor, and Centrica, to build the Humber Hydrogen Network, and some other pipelines and green hydrogen projects are are actively being pursued. Um, Although there is already one up and running, which is generating 15 megawatts of clean hydrogen capacity, which started in November last year and is now at full capacity. Um, and that would be one of the um, potential growth areas in that area. And Uniper has submitted planning application for a 120 megawatt UK green hydrogen plant. Slightly further afield, and then this is where we start moving into Rick's area of the world. Move has last week just announced that they will be moving forward with their and take an FID on their Anuba project, which is part of the Andalusian Green Hydrogen Valley vision. And it's actually Southern Europe's largest green hydrogen project, where they're planning to eventually ship hydrogen, green hydrogen, converted into green ammonia to Rotterdam as one of the export routes. And Rotterdam itself has already started building its hydrogen ecosystem with pipelines and green hydrogen projects, such as the Alligator project on the Maasvlakte in Rotterdam. So we're seeing Spanish solar, North Sea wind, and hydrogen all connecting up. And on a global scale, natural hydrogen is also being explored for. This is where the natural generation of hydrogen through either serpentinization or radiolysis or trapping of deep-seated hydrogen is actually being explored for through drilling and the standard sort of play-based exploration that you might be familiar with from the oil and gas business or from mining business. But there are many, many different play concepts that are actually being looked at, being able to explore and potentially develop and produce hydrogen if it's found at scale. Currently, there's only one country in the world, one place in the world, in Mali, where there is actually a continuously producing source of hydrogen, but there is exploration drilling ongoing, and and many countries are being studied for their future hydrogen potential. So here you see the plethora of potential startup companies that have actually already taken off in the last 5 years. There are very significant levels of early exploration activity and investment going on in the US, in Canada, in Australia, UK, and Europe, Middle East, Africa, South America. And there's also a conference on it at the GESGB in London next month. At the same time, helium is also growing in demand and shrinking in supply. The amount of helium, or the different countries that actually currently produce helium, are dominated by the US and Qatar, because currently it's associated with LNG. 95% of helium currently being produced is coming from associated with LNG projects. And the supply is actually concentrated in around 75% of it is produced by 5 plants globally. It's classed as a critical mineral or critical element, and it's also part of the wider energy transition in that it's a critical component of nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, and the semiconductor industry, medical industry, space exploration, computing, and industrial processes. Just looking at the UK, you can see that there's a very significant growth expected for the demand for helium in the UK, for instance, through the doubling of MRI scanners by 2030. And exploring for helium is similar to exploring for hydrogen and exploring for oil and gas. Um, and companies like GTech, Noble Helium, Helium One, Hotspur Helium, Helix Exploration have significant positions, acreage positions, and are actively exploring and drilling and producing in a number of areas of the world. And we're grateful to have Tom here to talk a little bit more about that as well. And green helium is actually produced from gas containing little, if any, hydrocarbons and produces no CO2 during extraction. So lastly, what about roles for geoscientists, jobs and transferable skills? Well, in the clean energy sector in the UK, the forecast is that there will be a doubling of clean energy jobs in the next 5 years. There are many similarities between different clean energy sectors. In the hydrogen business, there's quite a similarity with carbon capture and storage, but also with there's some transferable skills between oil and gas and hydrogen and the electricity and gas supply and wind. And UK clean energy salaries are actually rising faster than average, as you can see from this chart here. All of the clean energy businesses and sectors are actually doing well in terms of their average salary. So demand for low carbon hydrogen and helium is rising. Exploration and drilling for natural hydrogen and helium actually requires very similar geoscience, subsurface, and entrepreneurial skill sets to exploring and developing and drilling for natural gas and geothermal and for critical minerals. So with that, I'd like to move on to discussion. Perhaps start with Rick. If you could tell us a little bit about your background and where did you start your career in the energy sector and what did you study?
Yeah, thanks, Bas, and great to meet you all. Thanks for joining. So yeah, I started in Holland. I knew very early on, I think when I was 14, that I wanted to do geophysics and geology. And one of the reasons was that I always wanted to be outside and travel. And I always looked at one of the first things is, look, what do I need to study to travel a lot? And as you don't have rocks on the surface in Holland, well, very few carboniferous rocks in the south, you always had to travel if you are a geologist in Holland. So I decided quite early on that that would be the path to go for. So I studied the BSc was in earth sciences, so in geology, and I did a specialization in geophysics during the master. And then actually, what they always say is you have to choose your boss. So I started working for Bas in Shell at the time, right? In what they called, what I had no idea what it was, and I found out only later, was the production seismologist role, which was kind of the hybrid between geophysics, geology, reservoir engineer, I would say, at the time, and it was great fun, right? And I think the beauty of it, I joined in the NAM, which is the Dutch, or let's say, entity of the Shell ExxonMobil joint venture, looking after the assets in the North Sea. And the beauty of that was that you have a lot of mature fields. So you have a lot of infill drilling projects to optimize field production. So you had to cycle through projects from the beginning, interpreting seismic depth conversion analysis, well picking, going out there to the rig, drill the well, hook up in 24 hours, back to the next one, right? So that was a great school, I would say. Then I stayed in the geophysics and the geology sector. I went to Saudi Arabia for to the Aramco venture that the Shell had at the time, looking at a big field which was called Kidan. That was sour gas, 240 kilometers long, massive field, flat Arab deformation. So from a geophysicist perspective, extremely boring, right? Because just a flat pancake, so you can very quickly interpret it and do that. And for me, that was a turning point because I quite quickly discovered that the technical side did not match the commercial side. And that meant that this was a project that I had my questions about whether this was ever going to work. And then I raised that to the top. And luckily, Shell made the decision that they were with me. And we actually did the upstream exit at the time from Saudi Arabia. And for me, that was a turning point in my career because it really made me realize how big decisions you influence, but also the integrity piece of it, right? It's like we have a role to play. It's not if you're an explorer that you always have to find something. If there's nothing to go for, I think there's also a big role here to actually raise that. And that's just as valuable. And then don't want to bore you, but then I went to Enhanced Oil Recovery in Malaysia. I worked with Petronas Carigali on those projects. And after that, for actually not for by choosing, but for personal reasons, had to move to Houston. And the only job that was available, which was a great job, was a advisor to one of the executive vice presidents, which was commercial, wind, clean energies, etc. at the time. And that really made me move to look after portfolio and really dive into the commercial side of the portfolio. But I never let go of the earth science piece because that's so it's always remained a passion. But that analytical skill set, I think that you get in the geology, earth science side, and dealing with ambiguity, I would say that you're very used to in the subsurface side of story. I think that's just as valuable in the commercial side, and there's very few people that actually possess that. So that was
Thank you,
really
Rick.
my pivot point, Bas.
That's really good. Wow, fantastic. Yassine, how about yourself?
Hi, hello everyone. Hello, Bas. Yeah, so I studied physics at first. I was more of a geology enthusiast more than a geologist. After a few years, I needed to specialize. Then I decided to do geophysics, and that was my first job. I was doing seismic, especially seismic monitoring. We also did some acquisition on the field, which was very interesting, a lot of fun. And yeah, I was mainly doing physics more than geology, to be completely frank. But yeah, after a few years and the business was doing good, we started to develop a bit more. We were really focused on the oil and gas sector. We started to look at the CCS market. And when we started to look at the CCS market, we also, or I personally also got curious with helium and hydrogen. So that was around 2020, more or less. And yeah, started to look at the space and to try to understand a bit more the geology behind hydrogen and helium. And then I've met the team at HCO. And that was more or less 5 years ago, and I joined the team. And yeah, I remember one of my colleagues passing the days told me, like, if you change your job and find another way, you always need to be careful to like what you do and to have fun. And discovering exploration and discovering geology, I can definitively tell you, for any geophysicist, that's a lot of fun, especially going on the field and understanding really, the entire the entire project from the very beginning, from the screening study to hopefully the production one day of hydrogen and helium. So that's really what brought me here.
That's great, Yassine. I'm glad you're having fun in your job. That's really, really important. Max, how about you? Are you having fun?
I am absolutely having fun. Yes, still after all those years. First of all, Bas, thank you and Geoscientists for organizing this event. To come back to your original question, what did I study and how did I get where I am at the moment? So a little bit like Rick said as well, looking at high school, really interested in geography and geochemistry, made me go to geosciences. From there, maybe focused originally on geochemistry, but I saw that's pretty hard. Realized geophysics was even harder, so settled on geology. I really like the field work associated with that. Was planning actually to do a PhD, but then an opportunity came along to have, if you like, a few days at Shell in a fancy hotel. So I thought, why not? And of course, from one comes the other. So spent quite a few years with Shell, originally in technical roles, but over time actually also got very interested from not only the subsurface, how does that work, but how do you make money from it? And the two really need to come together. So that's the reason why I did my MBA, and also, if you like, found a way of combining technical roles with commercial roles over time, and float around a little bit in that space. And I think it's really important what was maybe said before as well. the geologists can deal with uncertainty, and even more so, they see opportunity in uncertainty, where an engineer hates uncertainty because the bridge or whatever it needs to be exactly right. But as geologists, we can see, hey, there is uncertainty, and we can create opportunities and hence grow business from that, and that's super valuable.
Fantastic. Thanks, Max. Tom, what was your original background, and what is it that drives you today?
Well, the great thing about going last is that I can draw a lot of the similarities, and I can I can attest that everything everybody has said so far is very similar to what I've done. So geography, I found geography very easy at school, and so the obvious thing to go and do at university was geology. And I spent 4 years at Durham doing a geology degree there, and by the time I got to the fourth year, I'd almost pigeonholed myself. By the time I was in that master's year, um, it was there was an entire focus for me, at least, on geothermal energy. So my research project was on heterogeneity of the Weird granite. I was doing one module that was looking at it was called a Earth Science into Society module that was looking at being a consultant for a geothermal project in the northeast of England, and through that I not necessarily fell into a job, but I got myself a job with a UK-based geothermal developer that was predominantly at the time working on projects in the northeast of England. The company then moved into East Africa geothermal development, sort of Ethiopia, Kenya. We owned a drilling rig that was operating in Kenya, and with that came the travel, and with that really piqued my excitement. And I think it was Rick who said, there was no he had to travel around with his job, and this was something that my chairman at the time said to me. He said, "Oh, there's no gold in the Surrey Hills. You've got to go out. You've got to go and explore. You've got to go and see the world." And that was completely true. And it was such a great opportunity, particularly as a young geologist, to go out there and to see all of these places. I spent months and months in the Ethiopian desert, and it was extraordinary, the skills that you pick up from doing that. I love being outside. I was always outside growing up, and being a geologist I was able to sort of continue that, really. But it also brings all sorts of other skills. You have to be a politician, you have to be an environmentalist, you have to be a logistics officer, you have to, there's so many different things that you have to do. You're not just, particularly when you're working in small companies, you're not just the person hitting a hammer against the cliff and putting it in a bag and taking it home. You've got to do an awful lot more than that. And that side of things I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed the operational side of things. I enjoyed the sort of the management side of things a lot. And after a few years, we got to a stage where I'd spent a lot of time working in East Africa then, but then also a lot of time in Indonesia and the Middle East. There was a real focus on the operational team that we built up. So together, a group of us thought, right, we can go and do this. We can take this and we can apply this to another commodity, and that's how we settled on helium. We looked at essentially every commodity out there, and decided that helium was one where there was. You mentioned it in your slides, Bas. Helium was one where there was this inevitable supply gap opening up for Europe, for the Middle East, and we felt this was a problem that we could solve, a problem we could address with our skills that we built up over the last 10, 15 years. So then it became a case of building up a team and growing a company and raising money and acquiring acreage and delivering projects, and that side of things is also extremely exciting. I think we're now at a stage that this webinar is about bringing people into the geoscience industry. We as a company are in a hiring stage. We're at a stage of growth. It's a great opportunity for people who are maybe just fresh out of university or a little bit further on, who are looking for that exploration opportunity, there's definitely some room for people to come in and spend their time in the desert negotiating with local guys about how it's really important that we take this particular stone away.
Thank you, Tom. Maybe I can come back to Max. In your current role, were there any new skills that you were required compared to previous roles that helped you, move into the role that you now have?
Yeah, I think what is very helpful from coming from oil and gas is understanding how play-based exploration works. Of course, started off for me then with understanding how oil and gas accumulations form, but that actually holds surprisingly similar for certain minerals like sedimentary copper, but also for hydrogen or helium traps. Again, you need to understand source rock migration, trap, seal, timing of all these elements. So that's fairly specific. Maybe another example is really critical thinking. You have limited amounts of information, and from those individual data points, you need to build a story. And you need to start saying, okay, this is more credible or this is more likely. And in most of those cases, actually, the simplest story is usually the right one. I talked earlier about dealing with uncertainty, but even being able, when you have your data points, giving confidence on your assessments, dealing with probabilities, it's all the same. What's different, again, working for a small company now, is you don't have the specialists for everything. We don't have a litigation lawyer we don't have an environmental expert helping with EAEs or anything like that. You have to do much more. But actually, I really like that because it really broadens your activities. It's if you start all over your career again, you have so much more to learn where you previously could rely on an expert. And that comes back to the fun which we're talking about, that learning curve, going up there, understanding new things, that gives a lot of job satisfaction.
Yeah, brilliant. How about you, Rick? I think you, out of all four panelists, you probably work currently for the larger side of companies compared to the others. As VP for strategy and growth, for Move, previously Cepsa, what sort of skills do you require that relate back to your geoscience?
Well, I think one thing is what Max just mentioned. I think it's almost the entrepreneurial side of things. I do think you need to be able to kickstart things and be hands-on. And I think from a geo community in general, we're pretty used to that, which is good. But what I think is really important is the ability to really think wide, the systems thinking, right? Even when we are in geology, you always talk around the big systems, how they interact, etc. And in the end, business is no different. Whether I look at a Iran event happening in Iran right now, whether it is Venezuela changing oil coming into the market, whether it is the EU changing its regulation on aviation fuel, etc. It's one big system coming together, and I think as geoscientists, I think we're very well suited to piece together how the system interacts, where the opportunities sit. And I think that has been one of the, to be honest, one of the biggest skills I think that I noticed, that especially compared to some of the engineers that we possess, that is extremely useful in this world. And how do you navigate those complex systems? And especially looking after strategy, of course, we are a small shell, I would say, a small BP. We're probably 20% of that, so not that small either. But it does mean that we sold our upstream business, so we're the only one who probably did that. We sold almost all our oil and gas business, 80%. So really going after biofuels, synthetic fuels, the chemicals industry, etc. And I think we are using a lot of our upstream staff in very critical roles in our business, in those new businesses. And I think they're very successful. And I think one of the things that systems thinking, the dealing with uncertainty and turning that into opportunity we spoke about, are really key things. And they have been for me, but I see the same for folks in the organization, that those are real contributors to success.
Yeah, very, very well put. Yasin, can I come back to you in
Sure.
terms of areas, the natural hydrogen exploration business at the moment is there's a lot of players out there. How do you make sure that H2AU is going to be successful?
That's an excellent question. First of all, I think there is enough room for all the players. The world is wide, and as you showed on the slide, the different type of plays for generating hydrogen is large. So yeah, there is enough room and enough opportunity, especially because this is so early days. Another thing that is very interesting is that we are not all exploring the same way. At HTO, we do it, I would say, in the old way, very similarly to if we were looking for oil and gas, basically. As Max said, we are having play concepts and try to follow the play, from the source to the reservoir, basically. There are other ways. Which one is the best? Only time will tell us. Only delivery will tell us. But what I like is the diversity of the background of the people on the different company doing it. And again, of all the companies that I would say trying to go in the same direction, which is really important, and doing it in different ways. We just, have. I think the most important is not to lose sight of what we try to achieve here, and the more the better. The more we are, the better to advertise for it and make it happen, basically, because there is still a long way to go. There is still many people to just, make aware of that's something that could be possible to do, that could, change a lot of things in local environment as well. And then I would say also our view is that it might be more of a local commodity than anything else. By this, I mean, if you find your hydrogen in the US or in South Africa, that's our two main projects, as you showed in the slide. We don't see it as a commodity that will be mainly for export. There is a local market which could be big enough to take on that hydrogen, and that could also be a leverage to increase the economy in this region. And I think that's true in almost most of the part of the world where we look at natural hydrogen, at least as a start, I would say. So
Thank you, Yassine. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. Tom, you mentioned at the beginning that Hotspur is going through a bit of a growth phase at the moment. What sort of opportunities are out there for people wishing to join the helium exploration business?
Well, really, we will, and all of this will be publicized as and when, but we will be looking for people who can go out there into the field, who can spend time doing geological mapping, spend time doing geochemical sampling. There are a lot of crossovers between oil and gas exploration and also geothermal exploration when it comes to helium. So those skill sets that you may have picked up or learnt during university are definitely applicable to helium, even if you haven't been focusing on helium as a commodity or a mineral. So yeah, it's having people who can go out there, who are trained, who understand how to collect samples and do the geological mapping side of things, essentially ground truthing, satellite data that we get in, is very, very important for us in the early stages. As we move on, as we go into drilling stages, then of course everything changes again, and you move into having people who are able to do all the logging and all that side of things too. So there's a real range of geological and geoscience requirements that we will be looking for over the next year, 2 years, 3 years.
And do people need to be mobile in order to be chasing those opportunities? They need to be able to go into the field, or is any
There's
work
a
remotely run?
Yeah, exactly. There's a real range, so having people who can plot lineaments on maps or very good at putting together maps is just as important as having somebody who can go into the field. So, there's a real range. Equally, people who can run lab samples, who can be doing all of the essential analysis of the data that's coming back from the field and putting it into the reservoir model. There's a huge amount of work that's done just behind a screen, just putting together all of that information and working out where we're going to be drilling our holes. So yeah, it's by all means, it's not just field work. There is a whole load of stuff
Okay,
that goes behind it.
very good. Perhaps I could come back to Rick. You've seen wide range of roles in your career. What advice would you give to geoscientists who are wishing to participate in the energy transition in terms of looking for opportunities and how to move into, for instance, hydrogen or clean fuels?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I always get asked this by our geoscientists as well, right? So how do I prepare for the future, and what do I need to do? I think the one thing is, don't expect opportunities to just simply come to you, right? I think the first thing is control your own destiny, at least to the extent you can. I think it is really around being active. Even forums like this, participate in these things, make the connections, and really try to understand what is out there. I think highlight. I think what I've seen a lot is that people highlight in general a lot of the technical skills. That's great. And that's important. Once you move up the ladder and you move into energy transition, I think that's given for taken as a given. It's really around how do you translate that analytical skill set and your behavioral skill set into something which is actually exploration as well. Because energy transition, whether it's in biofuels or it's in hydrogen, in the end it is again exploration. Things have a chance of success, etc. So I would really highlight those kind of skill sets, analytical components, if you want to profile yourself in that world. But also learn. I had to learn a lot. I think like one of the things that I never really dove into was, for instance, power markets. Yeah, if you move into hydrogen is a power game, especially, and I'm talking electrolytic hydrogen here. So it's all about power. So I had no idea what was a power purchase agreement, all these kind of things, how it works, mid voltage, high voltage, all these kind of things, and it all has a huge impact. So I think it really helps. You don't need to be the expert, but at least to be in a field where you feel comfortable understanding the basics and make the links and understand on how you can, because only then you can also understand on how you can contribute to these areas. And then it's much easier to have a conversation with people that are hiring into these roles. Again, you don't need to be the expert, but at least to understand where they're coming from. And I think that's all in our control, to at least use that curiosity, tailor that curiosity to those types of roles. And the other part was trading for me. I had no clue about trading. And I found out that the world is basically controlled by traders, whether it is on new commodities or existing commodities. So I had to really, and what I did, I called people that I knew that worked at Nasdaq and Dow Jones, and I spent 2 weeks sitting with them on the trading floor to really understand how they think, how they make decisions, etc. Now that sounds remote from do I want to work in hydrogen, etc. But I can tell you, it's all about the commercial game and how it comes together. So your technical skill set, how do you marry that with some of the understanding of the energy systems out there, trading, power, etc., will really help you in positioning yourself.
That's really good advice. Max, you're obviously in business development role yourself. Um, I can see you nodding a little bit to some of the things that Rick was saying and Tom was saying earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And
What
maybe
advice would
just
you give people?
yeah, just maybe to put a slightly different tangent on it, but building on what was said before, I would say rather than saying I want to work in geothermal or it has to be helium, go one step back and start thinking what really gives you job satisfaction. What do you really enjoy doing, independent of the type of commodity, really what it is. That's one. So look for a type of role. And secondly, make sure it comes back actually to exploration as well. The biggest discoveries are often made by serendipity. So expose yourself to the chance of something unexpected happen. My current role was also out of a chat which was not really related to a job with GTech. It came out of that discussion by accident. And that's what you need to expose yourself to. So I think it is, and the third element maybe to also really consider is, was at the start of this conversation as well, what is your boss? What kind of person is he or she? And do you like working with that person? Because you're spending a lot of time with it, and that comes back to the job satisfaction, making sure you have fun in the end. That's really what it is all about. Sure, we need to pay mortgages and all that kind of stuff, but making sure you enjoy what you do, everything else thereafter will become much, much easier.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Tom, it's there must have been quite a few discussions on global geopolitics over the last couple of weeks when the export of helium from Qatar at that point anyway was foreseen as coming to a bit of a temporary halt. How big is the sort of the global impact on your business?
Oh, it's huge, and that's exactly why we set up. That's exactly what we're looking to mitigate. You had a slide there, Bas, that was showing where all of the helium comes from at the moment in the world. It's not quite true because at the moment that red third from Qatar is currently zero, and there are only sort of 5 or 6 big producers, what we call mega facilities, producing helium almost always as a byproduct of LNG around the world. And if any one of those goes down, it doesn't have to be Qatar. It can be the one in America. It could be in Russia. It can be anywhere. If any of those go down, then you have a significant problem with the helium market. So that's exactly what we're addressing. We're looking for primary helium or green helium that's disassociated from oil and gas, and that is the whole thesis of what we're doing, is to separate those two markets. For Qatar produces so much LNG. I was at a conference last year that there was someone there talking about what helium is to Qatar. Well, it's not the tail on the dog, it's the flea on the end of the tail. And I thought that's such a great analogy because they're producing so much of that. And there's a real opportunity there. You see the graph on the top right of that slide. The UK market shortfall is going to be huge for helium in the coming years, and there's a real need for more helium supply. These global events, these black swan global events that nobody expects, have a huge impact on the global helium market. Over the last 20 years, there have been 4 significant helium shortages, each lasting sort of 2 to 3 years, which means that sort of 40 to 50% of the time the world has been in a helium shortage. So there's a great opportunity there to bring more helium online. And the way we're doing it is doing it at a massive scale. So going after these, what we call these elephants of fields that no one has really looked for before. So that's our approach.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yassine, I can see that there's a relevant question for you coming in from the audience. As the skill sets are actually similar, if not identical, between helium and hydrogen exploration, and the fact that they're also frequently co-located in the subsurface, how much collaboration actually happens between the helium explorers and the hydrogen explorers?
That's an excellent question. And as you might expect, there is a lot of collaboration, and we are collaborating, for example, in our US project with 45/8 Energy, which is a helium and now hydrogen explorer based in France. They bring a lot of experience basically on the helium side, and we are already producing helium in France. So that's very important. If I just get in very very quickly into the geological side of the helium and hydrogen. The source is different, but there is one major thing that they have in common is that they are basement gas, and they need huge faults, basically lithospherical scale faults, to get out of the basement, basically. And so they might share the same pathway, basically, even though the source might be different. I would add that helium is quite critical and important in terms of economy for the economy of a project for hydrogen. Helium can be, what make your project from economic to very profitable, I would say. So yes, a lot of synergy, and I see in the future as well a lot of even more synergies between the two commodities.
Max, have you got anything else to add to that?
No, not specifically. I think Yassine said it really well. There are similarities in exploration, and especially on the economic side, they can really help each other in order to lift projects to above the commerciality line.
Very good. Anybody else got any other pieces of wisdom that they'd like to impart to people that are either wishing to move across from the oil and gas business into the energy transition and contribute to that side of society, or people who are also just coming out of university and wishing to join the areas that you've chosen to specialize in?
I can answer that. I mean, so we just reiterating what a lot of people have said in terms of make sure that what you're doing is role specific and job satisfaction specific, but also, you know, say yes to things wherever you can. If you get an opportunity to go and do something, and it's always better to go and do it than not do it, because you learn a lot even if it goes wrong. So you're able to broaden your horizons in that way, and you meet all sorts of different people, and things come of events that you don't necessarily expect. So that would just be my 2 cents on it.
There's a positive mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, that is, Tom. Absolutely. I can see that you gents, you've all got the same spirit. I think that's really, really important. Absolutely. So we've got maybe 2 more minutes. If there's anybody else in the audience who would like to actually pose any questions, please do so on the question, the Q&A section, or in the webinar chat.
Well,
Oh,
that's
here we
just a
have one.
question
Do you
came
think?
in.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I was just about to answer that question from JJ
Please.
Trainer. Do you think these
Yes.
petroleum engineering skills are relevant? They are very, very relevant. We're still looking about some form of porous rock. At least that's an assumption for most hydrogen and helium traps, in which we need to drill wells, and we still need to understand how much each well can, if you like, produce, how many wells we need to drill, how to drill them, where to place them. So static models, dynamic models is exactly the same kind of thing as in oil and gas, in particular, maybe even more in gas, because we're dealing here with other gases in the subsurface as well. So yeah, super relevant. Of course, there are differences between the two, but that's maybe a second order delta. The primary thing is they are very much the same.
Yeah, and indeed, fracking and stimulation of the rock is also important to enhance the productivity, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Another question's come through. What educational professional institutions provide the best support for aspiring or prospective founders in the geoscience sector? I'm sure you'll have all your different favorites, but perhaps we could give a sort of multi-national perspective on that. Where do you think people should go to in terms of professional institutions for that?
So can I give a politically incorrect answer to that one? So I studied in Europe and in the US, and I did that on purpose because I think Europe is fantastic leading on the theoretical side of science, etc. I think if you really want to, on the commercial side, the US was way ahead. And I'm not saying that that's for every institution, but you surround yourself with a totally different mindset, the can-do mentality. And to be honest, I learned a ton of actually being in the US for a little bit and talking to institutions there. It's a totally different way of thinking. But whereas we have great ideas in Europe, often we don't know how to commercialize it. Very often on the other side of the pond, we have the opposite, where we lack the good idea, but we know for sure how we're going to make money out of this and how do we set up a business. And I think combining those two would be really something that I think sometimes we should explore a little bit more. No?
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to actually leave the last question to Tom, because I've noticed that you're actually fairly active on LinkedIn on the AI side of things as well, Tom. What are companies employing AI in any workflows? And do you think that that's actually going to be detrimental to to job opportunities for people in that in your industry?
It's a great question, and it's a fascinating topic, really. We use it as a tool to complement everything that we do. You still need to go to the field and get to know the local community. You still need to sit in the minister's office and show that you're a real person and you're a real company and you are worthy of having that license. You still need someone to run the lab sample. You still need someone to go and collect gas from a spring. There are a lot of things, of course, where AI can help speed process up. We have 20,000 square kilometers of exploration acreage. We need to trawl through that as quickly as we possibly can. And there are clear benefits to using machine learning tools and other tools to help with that. But no, I think, as much as I would certainly be encouraging the younger generation to go and train and be plumbers and make sure that you can do sort of more manual tasks, I think there's a real role there for geoscience, a real role for geologists, not just through the computer.
Thank you, Tom. And with that, I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you very, very much to all of the panelists, Rick, Max, Tom, Yassine. It was fascinating to be able to listen to your stories and listen to the advice that you give others. I'd like to highlight that there are a few more webinars to go, maybe 5 or 6, and they will be covering some of the diving into a bit more detail on some of the questions that you guys have asked about, for instance, AI and machine learning, and also carbon capture and storage. Also, just on integrated energy in the wider sense. But it's been really, really great to have you talk, and thank you very much for your time and enthusiasm and positive mindset. Alicia, is there anything else we need to do?
No. Thanks everyone. Thank you to our panelists that took part today, and thank you to Bas for organising this. Just a quick reminder that the recording of this webinar will be made available on our YouTube channel, and I will email that out on the email addresses that you registered with. So thank you so much. Bye everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. Have
Bye-bye.
a good trip, Rick. We'll just have
Thank
a
you.
quick wrap up with the other 3 people and Alicia.
Take care, guys.
Bye all.